the organizers to invite me to give a talk here and also participate with this very great workshop. I think I need to stay with my computer because this one is not working here. Okay. So I think for this audience, I don't have to convince you that binding kinetics, non-covalent binding kinetics is important. Yeah. So say, for example, mostly I talk to people in industry. They say 70% of the system, actually, the binding affinity and this the efficacy correlate very well. But just like 30% or less than that, unfortunately, it's not a lot. As you don't see this nice correlation, but they correlate better with the residence time. So that motivates us to understand a little bit more about what happened there. Okay? But the problem is, okay, we are not in the stage yet that we predict binding affinity. But let you guys tell us, okay, what kind of features that may tell us to have some guidance for the design or residence time, like longer or shorter. So for example, like for free energy for binding affinity, we know that we can increase the hydrogen bond, we can use unused space, we can reduce the entropy penalty to make things bind tighter. But how about kinetics? Okay, are there any general features that we can tune? And so that motivate us to do a little more fundamental understanding, and we use the P30A map kinase as a model system. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the method we try to use. It's not fancy, but it tell you what's going on there, give you some guidance. And in the meantime, also because some traditional sampling method is not working, I also want to tell you the new method developed in my group. So the kinase, we had two great talks from Sonia and Benoit about kinase. So I'm not going to give you too many information about kinase, but we know that the kinase is this enzyme, and then this is the P30A. It has this DFG loop. It's a serine threonine kinase. We use this particular system because it has more than 100 crystal structure, and we know that from Benoit's previous talk, there is a type 1 type 1 ligand and type 2 ligand. So until we get crystal structure, we do not know if it's type 1 or type 2. Yeah, that's fine, but at least we know there's type 1 type 2. For this particular system, there is interesting features from multiple groups with the kinetics data. As for type 1 inhibitors, which binds the DF gene in conformations after we get the crystal structure, and that's this top guy. And this is examples from type 2 inhibitor binds DFG out. If you look at the binding kinetics, K on and K off, it's very different. Okay, it's from different groups. They have this kind of conclusion. So what happened? Let's see this. For this top one and the bottom one, binding free energy or equilibrium position is similar, but you see the very different kind of 1,000 times difference in kinetic property. Okay, so one is getting to this, the other one is that. So it's not one is super big or one is small or something like this. Okay. So then there's something interesting in the intermediate state. So I try to convince with you, if you forget about binding kinetics, sometimes we really don't need that. You just talk about or consider the free and the bound state, and we can do thermodynamics in a very careful way, get all the energy wells for all those conformations in the free state and the bound state, and use statistical mechanics and thermodynamics, then you will be able to get binding free energy very well. Use the method that Mike Gilson and I developed when I was a graduate student. So we call the BM2 method. So it has, so for example, this the paper we published previously, like we have this 30 type 1, type 2 inhibitors, and if you do this free energy calculation using the Aberforth field, this is an absolute binding free energy experiment and calculation that works very well. Okay. So only free energy bound, just like an endpoint calculation. You don't need to worry about what happened in the middle. But the hit some question here is we have to know a little bit more about what's going on there. So the argument here is actually from previous work. People already showed. This is Tingjun Huang's work in Zhejiang University. He actually showed, and also consistent with our simulation, is you have this is P30A, this is DFG in binding type 1 inhibitor, which is the sign, and yellow is type 2 binding inhibitor. When they are leaving the protein, actually they are leaving from different positions. So that group that uses stir empty, and we just use our unbiased, not really unbiased, but accelerated empty. till we can get the two binding direction. Okay. So for this type 1 inhibitor, they show that, we also show that it's actually very easy to get from this, they call it ATP channel, so we keep talking this. And then for the type 2, they like to go from this allosteric channel. Okay. So there's still leave, right? So what happened to the leaving in different channel? So there's argument. So why is fast and why is slow? So what some people are arguing, like for example, like a Momentum system, is that it could be that one of those DFG conformation is rare in the free state or something. So you need to spend some time or effort to induce the conformational change. So you make that type of ligand slower. But in this case, it's not supported by NMR and by our free energy calculation, because in the equal state, it's 50 equal population. Okay. So in NMR, it's already out of the NMR range. So they cannot tell you how slow the transition is. But we believe it's slower than second, or maybe in second range. So you actually slow, moving up and down. So according to the gating theory that Andy McCommon and other people are working on, is if you have, this is a little bit like population selection. If you have a ligand, it likes to bind to the loop with a DFG conformation, and when you diffuse to the protein loop is a DFG out. So you will stay here and you will leave. Okay, so you won't stay until it's shifting. So because the time regime is too different, that's the gating theory. So it's not supported by this in and out transition because of equal population. And some people focus a lot on hydration side for water. So they think that this is the key point, a critical point to determine slow or fast binding. And we did not do very, very thorough water analysis, but we check hydration side for the loop in position and opposition. We also check the resolvation process, and we did not see the major difference that can contribute to 1,000 times different. Okay. And so this is not supported. And the only one that we suspect is slower because there's something happening during the binding process. Okay, it's also it's during the binding process, not in the final bond state. So people call this induced band, or maybe you can say this is some rearrangement during the process. And how could we prove it? Actually, we show that. Okay. So the first step, what we want to do is we want to just sample the unbinding path. So you can sample the binding path. So how to do this? We try to do accelerated MD, and this is show you this works. And we also try metadynamics, and it works for only fast binder. So this is the one that binds to the DFG in conformation, and then the residence time for experiment is roughly 5 seconds. And if you use the accelerated MD developed in Donald Halliburton when he was in Andy McCommon's group, and you can see the ligand actually jiggling a while, and you can observe some key interaction, and then it's broken, it's leaving. Okay. And we also do the same thing for this guy. And experimentally, that takes 2.7 hours to leave, and you just stay there forever, no matter what we did. We tried metadynamics, and it actually worked, but then the problem is, I think we were not the expert in metadynamics, so maybe there's something a little bit funny. So the ligand actually is out, but when ligand is going out, it's actually pushing some type of loop in a funny position to get out. So if you did not observe this very carefully, you saw that your metadynamics actually is working, but actually it's not. And so in this case, we are thinking, well, maybe there's another way to investigate or to sample the conformation. So in the meantime, my group is developing a search method based on MD simulations. Okay. So the other thing I want to mention is that for the work of this kind of sampling, we do not sample thousands or at least hundreds of binding pathway, but we focus on the position that the ligand is ahead of leaving the pocket. Okay, because this is basically the most important thing that determines your binding kinetics, which is on roughly when it's leaving the pocket. When it's leaving on the pocket, on the surface, it will have so many different kind of paths, and we don't do very thorough investigation on that. Okay, so what can we do? Because we try to method, they fail. So the way that we try to do it is spend 5 minutes to introduce you. This is the pathway search guided by internal motion done by my graduate student and postdoc in my group. And which is the user idea is from, you just run regular empty simulation in the bound state, and then you compute their principal component modes and get a set of eigenvector, eigenvalue, and then try to combine them to guide your ligand to lead to the pocket. Okay, that's the idea. This is simple, and there is a lot of details. I'm not going to talk about this. But one of the key critical points is we cannot use a Cartesian coordinate. We have to use an internal coordinate, we define a torsion coordinate, or traditionally, if you use quantum calculation, we call this matrix. So advantage is the dihedral coordinate is a smooth rotation. Right? So you want to make your motion smoother, especially you want to distort some conformational change. That's one advantage. The second advantage is for dihedral rotation, you can easily select dihedral. So this largely reduce your principal component modes. And for Cartesians, you cannot do this easily. But when we try to use the classical way, we have problem. Because for classical Z matrix, that's all those atoms is actually defined by their previous, like the 3 atoms. So in this way, if you have the large protein big enough, like you have this big protein, the dihedral angle here move a little bit will affect the other motion on the end. So this is a kind of artifact that it's going to produce. So we have to develop this new, we call that multi-layer internal coordinate, which is defined by a bunch of fragments and linked to the main fragment, and also the dihedral. We have to use a sine cosine. If you don't do this, you have plus and minus 180 degrees jumping around. Then you affect the calculation in your matrix. So in this case, it also has another advantage is that when you are doing some kind of conformational analysis, if you identify, say, for example, a few dihedral angle is hinge motion, you can focus on this one and you can manually rotate it. Okay, so it will give you some ideas about the larger scale conformational change. But then we use this method, and then we'll give you the binding pathway for both the allosteric channel or ATP channel. So you can see that sometimes when you are doing this search, so some degrees of freedom is one of that focusing. So you can see some of this is keep rotating, and then we fix the bottom part there. So because of this, there's a certain dihedral peaking, so we can easily select some dihedrals that are of interest. Okay, so then that's at least working. And then we have multiple different paths. Okay, so the next step is we want to get a little more quantitative information about when it's leaving, what's going on. What's going on in session and your ligand, what's going on in your protein motion. So you could do a multiple different way. We do milestone theory, and also here we use umbrella sampling. Okay, so you may argue this is old-fashioned. Actually, it's not really old-fashioned. It's still useful. At least it's simple enough that people understand what's going on there, and it gives you information about this interfacial motion. Okay, so say for example we have it's a little bit artifact because you need to define, okay, this is a pathway, and you will have some kind of coordinate you need to restrain that. So each window, we have a tiny window, like a point to angstrom. We have a tiny window on this. And another problem we have is because we get our path from accelerated MD or our search method, so we save that every 10 picosecond. So it's a kind of a large time steps, right? So in this case, sometimes the ligand or protein already moved too much. So we cannot pick up those frames for our point to window. So then in this case, we get a lot of frames and run a bunch of short classical molecular dynamic simulation on BIOS, 10 nanosecond only, and then bridge that to smooth all the frames. And then combine with that, we'll have this unbinding coordinate. So then what can we do? And so you may argue, say, well, it's umbrella sampling. We know that you cannot really get a reasonable binding free energy, or the path or the magnitude may not be right, but it's still useful. Okay, so I'll give you some information. We use a small molecule to test this about the umbrella sampling, and want to give you some ideas about where is that useful and which part may not be, you just take a grain of salt. So this one is a cyclodextrin. So this is small system, this is experimental data. I just show two ligands here. So the paper just published, and we run microsecond MT simulation, brute force. Then we will be able to get association, dissociation rate constant, enthalpy and entropy. And then the important thing is, let me show you. Okay, so from this one long MT simulation, you get multiple on and off. Okay, so from there, you get a statistic and you get a path. So from the path, we know that the ligand seldom just go directly to solvent or directly get to binding site. It just likes to get to the kind of a little bit like surface on this. Okay. And this actually agree with the pattern of umbrella sampling. So this umbrella sampling, we focus on going this side, not the other side, because that's a different ring. The ring has a two direction, right? And from the brute force MD, we know that umbrella sample, we know that for MD simulation, it will give you a bunch of different cyclodextrin conformation because it's actually pretty flexible. And we get over this and start our umbrella sampling. And those conformations are real. They're from MD simulations. Okay, if you trust the force field. And in this case, because we do not have crystal structure, we do not know which one is the lowest conformation. So you start from this one, and you do umbrella sampling. This is the distance. This is the potential mean force. This is the energy. And you can see that they have a barrier. So the first barrier is from the middle, get out of this, and then you have this kind of local energy minimum is when it stay on the surface. And this is total desolvation. Okay, so you have some period of tiny barrier and major barrier. Okay, so from here, it captures what happened, but the magnitude, so the real absolute free energy is actually pretty sensitive to the conformation you start with. So even small molecules, you have this, and this is the same, another even smaller one. So if you want to compare with the absolute value for the barrier height, it's a kind of dangerous, it probably doesn't work, but still, the barrier can tell you what happened there. So it gives you some kind of a guidance to show you what's there and where I should look at. So that's the idea. We use this for larger systems. Although, just like what I said, it's not really accurate to give you the barrier height, but from checking the barrier or checking what's going on there, you can have ideas about what's going on. So here, this is the first, the one we want to point out is that this is the bond state starting from crystal structure, and then you move a little bit, we start to dissociate or use umbrella sampling, follow the path we got, and to move the ligand a little bit, and then we'll jiggle it a little bit, and then hydrogen bond, important hydrogen bond break. So when the important hydrogen bond breaks, it's actually not in this peak, it's in somewhere kind of a tiny peak is in the middle of that. So they'll continue, is losing some interaction, forming some interaction, losing some interaction, and solvate, dissolve. So you get a little bit like the curve like that. So I'm not going to talk about the detail on this. This is a fast spider. So the path is from umbrella, from accelerated MD, and use classical MD to smooth out, and umbrella sampling to give this guidance to tell us where to look at. And the next one is the slower guy. The slower guy is going to the other side channel that we believe also the umbrella sampling shows that this is the preferred channel. And in this case, it also starts from the jiggling and two key hydrogen bond breaks, but it's not really in the peak, it's in somewhere. And then it starts to move a little bit. So there are forming, reforming, and breaking. So there's multiple things you can see. And so finally dissociate. Okay? Just look at this. It's not unexpected because we already have experience for cyclodextrin. The height, I cannot tell you too much. And even we start from crystal structure. Cyclodextrin, we do not have a crystal structure, but this guy, we actually have crystal structure. Then you cannot tell exactly, well, this height here, well, it doesn't tell you this is slow, this is fast. Okay? But there is information there. Because from the free energy, there's the barrier, we notice that it seems that in this point, there's something a little bit funny there in protein, like a conformation. And we also notice that there is some hinge motion for protein. moving. Okay, so the hinge motion, it looks like interesting, and we know the protein is breathing in the free state. So it's common, right? So if you work on protein, you know that even in free state, the protein may move, like this is the two lobe, like N lobe and C lobe, they move like this, they're breathing. Okay, they may be functional important, we don't know why it's moving like that, but we know that in the free state, it has this, okay? But then we try to think about, okay, skip this. What's going on here? Since it seems that the protein motion is involving there, but we don't know how much is contributing to the dissociation. So what we're trying to do is we try to do another one-dimensional umbrella sampling. Actually, we try two-dimensional 2D. One is a ligand pooling, one is a protein conformational, like a hinge motion. But the result is not clean as this one. So I'm going to show you this. This is the fast inhibitor is doing binding this way. Slower one is getting that way. So what we're trying to do is we know the path. So we put the ligand in the multiple position. You don't need to put that many, but we just put, say, show 4 here. So this is the bound state for crystal structure, and this is a kind of free state is putting out. And there's the 2 intermediate states that we got from our path. Okay. So this is the kind of a distance between some kind of residues or we select for the protein. You can select a bunch of different ones, and they give you the same results. So how to read this? This is the free energy correlate to the motion of the protein. Okay. So in this case, when you put your ligand in the bound state, so this is the blue one here, your protein still can do this breathing motion. So then that's here, and then you do a little bit. And when you put that in the free state, so they still do this breathing motion. Okay. And the distance or the equilibrium position is the same around this position. When you put your ligand in the dissociation pathway, your protein still can move. It doesn't affect the intrinsic breathing motion. And so that's the red one here, and another one is the green one here. So it seems that it doesn't perturb by binding of the ligand, and the protein still moves. Okay. But the funny thing, very interesting and very different, is if you have this guy for the DFGL, so also in the beginning, this is the bound state, this is the free state. So if the protein is a free state, it doesn't matter if your loop is in or is out, they still can do breathing motion. And this one is a little bit more restrained a little bit. When your ligand is getting inside, the well is a little bit narrower, but it's still allowed to move a little bit. Okay. So the huge difference is when the ligand is in, we call that entrance of a cleft or some kind of in between this opposite helix and also this loop, there is a period of time that the protein, they have to move a little bit more. And the thing is, the little move is fine, but it's not favorable in energy. Because if you compare the bound state should be here. So if you force your protein to open like this one, and it doesn't like it. So this is the way that makes things slower getting and slower moving out, because of the barrier that's causing from the free energy of the protein motion. And this is the kind of hidden in the binding process. Because if you look at the bound state, you do not really see the rearrangement. After you rearrange, it's actually happy, but it's only unhappy during the binding process. Okay. So then it gives us some take-home message about we have this, we sample this dissociation, and it can be successful for a quicker binder, which is the one that was DFG, binding to the DFG in with accelerated MP. But for slower one, we still have to use a little bit more aggressive method, which is the new method. I introduced you to use this dihedral, this critical component. So for this DFG ligand, it needs the protein to move in an unfavorable position. This is the protein, okay? So not just a ligand. So if you use like a QSAR type of ligand analysis, you don't see any difference, because that's the transition state that you really want to see. Okay? So in this take-home message that will tell you is if you're developing drug, and if you have the system like this binding and binding, you want to see this fast and slow, and you want to, for this case, it's intrinsically for the protein rearrangement and during the binding process. So It of course is related to the property of the ligand because you have a different kind of shape of the ligand is getting to different position. But from the study here is it's basically not possible to make your type 1 ligand very, very slowly in this case because it just does not cause the protein to have this unfavorable conformation. And the other way is it's also extremely hard, almost impossible, I should say, to get a reasonable tight binder for type 2 ligand, but make them very fast because intrinsically the path they will be able to get. So then for the people, if you are curious about how are you going to distinguish and what's going on there, you may, you don't want to spend too much time, but you can take the system and try to use some metadynamics, as the regular MD, and then try to dissociate, get a few dissociation paths, and observe a little bit for this protein free energy change, and may give you some idea. Of course, there are some details in the binding pathway that determines the fast and slow. And we have other milestone free energy profile give you a little bit more information, but even you just run those accelerated MD, then you'll be able to see some information. So that's in the process. So it's not really in the final bound state. So that's the suggestion that we may have on this work. Okay. So the last one, okay. So the last one is I just want to thank my crew. And one is doing this breast sampling work, P38, and Chia, he's right now in Naga University, is developing this pathway search method, and also some crew member, and also Inlo and Dano, Hamburger, Georgia State is helping us to run accelerated MD and a Gaussian weighted accelerated MD. And money, everybody here. Thank you.
You argue that when the slow unbinding had to sort of open up the
a little bit,
right?
Yeah,
and
it's unfavorable.
But why didn't that show up in the 1D potential mean force when you pull the ligand?
That's a very good question because when you're doing 1D, we check very carefully for statistics. The statistics actually is for this direction only. So it's for umbrella sampling. You have this probability, right? So they are still preferred in this position and that position. It's in some point. So for example, ligand is here, the protein has to move or something. This is not showing that particular 1D. But you got some hint. So it seems that there is a barrier there, but the barrier is just not high enough to tell you that, okay, this is higher than the other. You see that here, actually exactly for 1D, to be honest to you,
at B you have a barrier.
Yeah, actually you have the barrier. That's exactly here. But it's not high enough. The reason it's not high enough is because umbrella sampling is for the probability to see which the window in this side is biasing, right?
But in principle, it's that when DPMF was well sampled, the indirect work should show up there too.
It will, but I think I'm still argue that the height is still not accurate. Because the thing about this, you're in this particular window, right? So the ligand is here, but as the protein has to rearrange this a little bit higher, larger clap, and you make your ligand move, and there's a hint there. And then we have a very small window, and we sample like each window we have a pretty long simulation. Like 20, we try to make them more, and we even try 2D. To be honest, I think maybe 2D will exactly show you this, but it could be it's not converged very well yet. So our 2D, you can see something that's there, but the data is kind of messy. Yeah. But the protein is so that's why people don't like umbrella sampling because they think it's too many degrees of freedom moving, and you're simplify that. But my argument here is they still can show you something, give you some guidance. And especially we do not calculate rate very accurately, right? So we want to have the guidance. They can do experiment in a day, right? So, yeah.
I think it's a little bit related to Lana's question. So I guess if your path,
Yeah.
so you're taking calculating this free energy along a certain path. Right?
Yeah, the certain path. Yeah.
So if that path is not representative of unbinding paths.
Yeah,
You can also have that same.
that's right. Yeah, but
I was going to ask you,
yeah.
how do you know, I was going to ask you to say, if you could say a little more about your pathfinding method and how you can have confidence in it. Is there ways that you can check that it's reliable?
Yeah, that's a very good question about the robustness, right? So robust for all of the calculation we need to do. We got more than one path. Okay, we got more than one path. And the other thing here is because this is such a tight binder, and there's no, you could argue that they could go here, here, here. But because of the nature of the pocket, there's actually no other way for it to move. So we run multiple pathway search method. For this one, we can only rely on pathway search method, and that seems the only reasonable way to get out. So it has the allosteric one, it has the ATP binding side, but for ATP binding side, the free energy, actually for this free energy for ATP binding side is way higher. So umbrella sampling is still working. And if you dissociate that from ATP binding side, the DFG loop has to move from out to in, which takes some time. So this umbrella sampling actually could tell you if the difference is big enough. But yeah, we have the same concern. Do we miss some binding path? But if you look at the protein carefully, there's actually no too much room for that when it's kicking out. But when it's getting out, there is a way that is moving here and here and here. And we don't sample that well, I should admit.
Let's thank our speaker again.